Hey everyone, I wanted to address something that is very time specific because on November 5th, this coming Tuesday, we have a very important election coming up. And I wanted to address a question that has been floating around, and I don't know why this is floating around. I've not heard this in years past, and maybe I just wasn't listening or whatever. But the question that's been floating around is, should Christians vote? And there are actually people like Russell Moore who put an article out in Christianity Today encouraging Christians not to vote. And according to a recent Barna study, they predict that 35 million Christians who are registered to vote will sit this election out. And so I wanted to address this and to encourage you to vote. So if you don't want to watch the whole video, the short answer is, should Christians vote? Yes, I highly encourage you. Get out and vote your convictions. Now, for those who want to stick around to hear some explanation, let me talk about this because there are two reasons why people say that Christians shouldn't vote. Number one is Christian nationalism, and the other one is that neither candidate, for a better way of putting it, is Jesus. Okay? So looking at Christian nationalism, honestly, this is just kind of a thing that people have put out there to discourage people from voting. Yeah, we shouldn't put being an American above being a Christian, but just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're not also an American or whatever country that you're a part of. And there's nothing wrong with pride in the nation that you're a part of. Not to the extent that you're like, we're so good, we're not going to share the gospel or we're better than them or anything like that. But we want the best for our country because that's the place where we live. In fact, God encouraged that kind of nationalism among the Israelites so as to get a country that was so godly that they would provoke other nations to jealousy to come and, look at God as their God, to take him on as their God. That was the purpose of Israel's nationalism. And so while we're not in that same position, we want the best for our country. And how great it would be to see a country where we are blessed and prospering, and it would cause others to say why. And they would say, oh, because the Christians came out, voted, did their thing, and they're having a nation that follows after God. That's what we want. So we should be voting in a way that causes our nation to turn after God. Does the Bible actually address this? Well, they didn't vote. Realize that Israel was occupied by Rome, and Rome wasn't going to let anyone vote. I mean, they're out conquering places. In the Old Testament, there was no voting because there was no government structure set up that way. But the Bible does address it in different ways. Number one, we're encouraged to pray regularly for those who are governing over us. One example is 1 Timothy 2, 1-2 says, "Therefore I exhort, first of all, that all supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and all who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence." Paul is encouraging people to pray for their government so that they can lead quiet and peaceable lives, so that the gospel can go forth unrestricted. We don't want to get leaders in place that would restrict the movement of the gospel. We're already seeing that in places, even like in the UK, where they are arresting people for praying silently in their heads outdoors in public spaces. We don't want that to happen. So part of our civic responsibility is to vote in ways that won't allow that to happen. In Titus 3:1, it says, "Remind them to be subject to rulers and authorities, to obey, to be ready for every good work." While we can't always control who's going to end up in authority over us, in order to obey authority, they need to be not restricting us or telling us not to do things that aren't godly. And so we want to vote in people that are going to help us make that easier for us to obey them. Does that make sense? And then finally, in Jeremiah 29:7, this is not just an encouragement of taking part in civic responsibilities in your hometown, but even in places where you are at against your own will. In Jeremiah 29:7, it says, "And seek the peace of the city where I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to the Lord for it, for in its peace you will have peace." The Bible continues to say things like, "For when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked are in authority, the people groan in suffering." We want to make sure that we're doing the best job we can as citizens to have righteous governing. And in America, we're in a place where we actually get to vote for that. So we have a duty to vote. Now, the question then comes up, where I said neither candidate is Jesus. What happens if you don't like either candidate? Well, I'm sorry. That is the reality of almost every election. We've never had Jesus on the ballot. No candidate has ever been absolutely perfect, and there's going to be flaws with everyone. But one of the things that I take solace in is I'm not voting for a particular candidate. I'm voting for platform, and I would encourage you to vote on platform, not on candidate. We can get behind platforms a lot easier than we can get behind candidates. And how do you choose the platforms? And that's easy. The Bible tells us that the 10 Commandments were set up in a way so as to give us the moral foundation for a thriving society. And when we move farther away from the 10 Commandments, our society will suffer. And so what we want to do is look for the candidate that has the platforms that support the most things that align with the 10 Commandments. And when we do that, we've made our decision. We know how to vote. So you need to get out and vote. I just want to encourage you. If you've been thinking, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to sit this one out. It doesn't matter. My state always goes this way anyway. So whatever I do, it doesn't matter. It matters. Get out and do it. It matters to you. It matters to God. It matters to the people around you. So my encouragement to you is don't be one of these Christians who are saying, I'm going to sit this one out for whatever reason. There's no real good reason for it. Get out and vote. Vote your conscience. Vote according to the 10 Commandments. Vote by platform, not by candidate. And with that, hopefully, I'll see you with an I voted sticker. And if you've already voted, good job.